Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial we're going to use Blender 2.8 to create some volumetric lighting. So let's open up this video file. We'll watch this example I created before and we're going to create something similar to this. So if we pause it, we can have a quick look and we can see that we've got this light source at the top and that's illuminating this text. So it starts off black and as the text moves in it gets illuminated. Then we've got this other light source that flows from the background to cast shadows. And then finally we've got these particles that float up. So let's create something like this, but let's try and do something better. So we'll open up Blender and we'll go to General and then go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Lighting Text -01 to give your file a sensible name. And then we'll middle mouse click and rotate around. We'll click on this cube and hit the delete key. We'll press Shift A and insert a text object here. We'll press number 7, that takes us into the top view, and then we'll go to object and go to edit mode here. Then we'll delete this, use the backspace key, and you can type in anything you like. I'm going to type in lighting with an exclamation mark. You can type whatever you like. Then we will go to our web browser and we will download this font. You can choose any font you like. I'm going to download this specific font. This one, so I'll put a link to this in the YouTube description, but you can browse on the website and pick any font you like. I'll click download, open up the folder, drag and drop this font, right click and extract it. So we'll delete the zip file and rename this to font. So now let's go ahead and open up Blender again. And we'll go to the object data here. We'll click on font and we'll click on the open folder. We'll go to this font folder that we just created. I'm going to select semi-bold. You can select any of these you want. Maybe let's try extra bold. Let's see what that looks like. Click open. So I think that will be okay actually. And what we'll do is we want to set the spacing a bit wider. So character spacing, we'll set it to 1.1. And then the size, I'm going to set it to 2.4. It's quite big. Then we'll go to the geometry and we set the extrusion to 0.24. And we'll set the bevel depth to 0.02 and then the resolution to 2. Then we'll go to object, set origin, geometry to origin. So that will center it up. Then we can hold down our middle mouse button and rotate upwards, and then we can see our text like this. Let's zoom back a little bit. With this text selected, let's just click on the drop down to select the text, then press R to rotate, press the X key to lock it on the X axis, and then press 90, so it will rotate around 90 degrees. Then we'll press number 3, that takes us into the right orthographic. We'll use the move tool and we just want to drag it so that it's half a block. So it's like 1/2 of these blocks above the floor, roughly. Then we'll middle mouse click, rotate around, and we've got our text here. Let's zoom out a little bit so we can see the text something like this. When you can see the text something like this on your screen about this size, press Control Alt and 0. Control Alt 0. That will move the camera to this view. And then we just need to adjust that slightly. So we'll click on the camera. And we'll click on the object data here, and then the X location we're going to set to 0, the Y rotation we'll set to 0, and the Z rotation we're going to set that to 0. Then all we need to do is work with the Y location, the Z location, and the X rotation. So for the X rotation we're going to set it to around 88 degrees. Set it to around 88 degrees. Then on the Z axis we're going to move it up so that the text is sitting around here, somewhere like this. And then the Y we're going to bring it in slightly. Maybe we'll move it down a little bit, something like this. We want the text to be, we want a bit of space at the top here. Something like this. We'll press Shift A and insert a mesh plane. And then we're going to press S to scale. And we're just going to scale it out to about this size. We want to scale, in fact, we want to scale it out until it goes past the camera here at the bottom. Then we want to press S to scale and then X to lock it on the X axis, and then we want to scale it out on the width so that the floor is wider at the back here than the camera, right? Something like this. And you'll see the line for the plane will cut through the text like this behind it. So we'll go to File, Save. Then we are going to click on this light source and delete it. So click on it and then hit the delete key. Press Shift A and insert a light. Let's see, a light spotlight. So here's our spotlight. Click on the blue arrow. So you need to make sure the move tool is selected. Click on this blue arrow and drag it up to around here. So it's just at the top of the camera here. Go to File, Save, and then we want to go to the render view. So click render view here. Click on this light data, and then the size we want to increase it. So something like this, so you can see it's much wider. So it's highlighting all of the text now. And then the blend mode, we want to set that all the way to the top. Something like this. And then we're going to go to shading. In fact, before we do that, let's click on render here. And then click on volumetric. Set the tile size to 4 for now. And then set the samples to 120. And then turn on volumetric shadows and set that to 100. In the viewport sample, we'll set it to 120. And then the render samples we can leave at 64 for now. So let's go to File, Save. We'll press 0. If you move the camera, if you move the viewport, press 0 to get back to the camera view. Then we want to turn on bloom as well. And we'll adjust the bloom settings afterwards. So we want to now go to the world settings here. And then click Use Nodes. And then set the color to black. Now go to the shading, and in the top view here, make sure you click render, and then also move your mouse cursor to here and press 0. That will take you to the camera view. Then over here in the object, we want to go to world, and we'll see the background color. We just created the black one, right? This is the background with the black color. Let's zoom in here a little bit so you can see it a bit easier. And then we want to press Shift A and insert shader, volume scatter, and we'll drag that to the volume here. Then the density, we want to set it to 0.010. 0.010, and then this option here, we need to adjust it slightly. You can experiment this, but now you can see the faded light coming down. Let's press F12 to render it. So we see if we press F12, it will render out that light, and now you can see that volumetric light coming down. So we need to make some more adjustments. So let's see. Let's I think we should leave it around here. You can increase this to 0.015. And then I'm setting this to, let's just set it to 0 for a minute. So I'm leaving this on 0 and I'm setting this to 0.015. And you can see the sort of lighting effect you're getting. If we go back to the layout and then press 0 on our keyboard, we should be in camera view right now, yeah? So you can't really see the camera too well, but this is the camera highlighted in yellow. Let's click on the spotlight and then go to the spotlight settings, and then we might increase the I don't want the radius to be too big. Maybe we'll bring its energy down slightly. I think that's going to be okay. Let's go to the render settings here, and then in the knee, sorry, we want to bring that down a bit. Let's zoom in here, we'll see it a bit clearer. these settings you can experiment with. Like if you have it too high, you can see what it's doing, right? It just doesn't look right. So we want to bring these settings down a little bit, adjust them, maybe increase the intensity. So I'm setting that to around 2, setting this to around 5, and this to 0.2. And the rest of the settings I'm going to leave as they are for now. So something like this, where it's kind of faded on the floor. And really what we want to do now is click on the spotlight and then go to the object data here and change the color. You can pick any color you like. I think I'm going to go for, let's see, too much choice. I'm going to go for blue. So I'm going to set it to like a blue color. And then we might, let's see. Don't really want the radius to be, leave the radius on 0.25, leave it on its default. Set the size I'm setting to around, let's see, 94 I think will be fine. And make sure the blend is all the way up, because if it's not up, it's looking a bit harsh now, right? On the floor. I mean, you may want it to be like that, that's fine, then leave the settings like that. But I kind of want to have it like faded around the edges and blending in, right? So what we will do now is click on this light source, this top one, so it's called Spotlight. Let's call it Spot Top. So I'm going to rename it to Spot Top. The plane I'm going to rename it to Floor. Then we'll click on this Spot Top. Doesn't really sound right, does it? Let's call it Spotlight Top. Then we'll move our mouse cursor into the screen here, press Shift D to duplicate, and then hit the Enter key. So then this will be Spotlight Back. So one's going to be top, one's going to be back. So we'll click on this back one, drag it down so it's behind the text, somewhere around here. Then we're going to press R to rotate on the X-axis, and we're going to rotate it 180 degrees. Well, let's see, let me see, that can't be right. Let's try that again. So R to rotate X, 90 degrees I think it is. Let's check. So right now it's pointing the wrong direction. It's going that way, right? We want it to face the text, where our camera is over here somewhere. So the best way to do that is just click on the spotlight here, go to the object data. You can see the rotation set to 90 degrees. So if we keep rotating it, we want to rotate it all the way around. In fact, we don't want it to be, we kind of want it to point up a little bit. So let's set it to 265 on the X. And then we're going to drag it back a bit behind the text. So I'm setting it, let's move it back a bit more and bring it down. And for the just for the minute, I'm going to click on solid view, and we can see the space behind there. That's roughly where this spotlight, there's one at the top, there's one behind the text pointing towards the camera at 165 degrees of rotation. So let's go back to the render view and press 0. Now you can see that text. If we were to move this light, you can see it's getting illuminated by this spotlight. So let's leave the spotlight sort of in between these two letters, because then we can see the shining on the floor. So let's go to the floor material, click floor, click on material, and then give it a new material. And then we want to set the specular down, increase the roughness and set the specular. I don't really want to see, I mean, you can if you want, you can have that sort of shine on the floor. If you wanted this shining, let's see, let's click on this light. So as we move it, especially when it's off camera, you're going to see all of this shine here on the floor. To get rid of that, we'll go to the floor, click on the material or create a new material for it, and set the specular all the way down to 0. We can just set the roughness down to 0 as well. So as that light source moves across, it's going to cast the shadows and do all that good stuff, but at the same time it's not going to illuminate this floor, or the floor won't receive the specular, this shine, right? So we want something like this. So then you can click on this spotlight back, click on the object data, and you can change the color. We can change the radius as well, so we can actually increase the radius. The size we don't really want to mess around with, so the size we'll leave at 94. Let's just rotate around and see what's going on here. So that's like the width, can you see how it's shrinking and growing? So we'll leave that at 94, but then the radius is how wide is it. So let's press 0, and then we can see as we increase the radius or decrease it, it's going to affect how this text is illuminated. So we want it to be quite close in. So as we move the camera across the text, it's going to illuminate it bit by bit. And we might want to bring this down a little bit more to around here. And where you move this this light source is going to affect the shadows that are casted as well, right, on the floor. So you try and get it to where you think is a good position. What I might do is click on this top one, this one here, and I'm going to turn off the shadows on this one because it's casting these shadows down here and I don't really want them there. So if I turn this off, then the only thing that will cast shadows now is going to be this text that flows across, right? So what we could do is press, we can go into the solid view here. Let's go to File, Save. We can press number 3. That takes us into the right side, orthographic. We can click on this text and we can bring it down so it's pretty much, if we see, it's going to be pretty much touching the floor. It's like one little square block away like this. So we press 0 again. That takes us into the camera view. Go back into the render view. Now you can see the text is very close. Let's press F12 and render this view out. So I think that's going to be okay. I wonder if we should put that shadow back. So let's click here and then let's go to the top one and put the shadow back. Let's press F12 now. I think we should leave that shadow there. It kind of gives the illusion of the text sitting on something, right? Or there's something underneath it. If we remove it, it just looks like it's floating. It doesn't look quite right. So I think we leave the shadows there from this top light that's casting these shadows downwards. And then the light that moves in the background is also going to cast shadows, right? This one in the background, this one. Okay. So, let's see. For now, we're going to leave this light source on the side here. Let's go to File, Save As, and we'll save it as version 2. And click Save. Then we're going to press Shift A and insert another plane. So we've got this plane here. We will go into the solid view and then press number 7. That takes us into the top view. If we zoom out, this is the plane that we just added, right? This one here. And we're going to press S to scale, and we're going to scale it in so that it's just a little bit wider or taller than the text, right? So you can see there's a little gap here and a little gap here. Then we're going to press S and then X to scale it on the X axis only. We're going to have that to be slightly wider than the text here. So you can see there's a little gap around the edge now. So all we've done is created a plane that just covers all of the space for this text. Then we'll go to the the render view again. We'll press 0. We can see this plane on the floor now. And we're going to press Shift A and insert a UV sphere. So here we've got this UV sphere. And we're going to go to Object and Shade Smooth. Then we'll press S to scale. And we're going to scale that down to something quite small, around this sort of size, which is exactly 0.064. So let's set that to 0.050. So I'm just going to set the X, the Y and the Z to 0.050 for this sphere. We might adjust it a little bit later. So we've got this sphere, that's this one here. Let's name it particle. and then the floor is going to be the, let's name it particle emitter. So this is going to be the particle, this will be the particle emitter. Let's click on the particle, go to the material, go to new, and then set it to an emission shader. So in the strength setting here, we can increase this because we want our particle to be stronger. We want it to give it more light so that we can see the glow effect that's coming off of this particle, right? Sometimes it's worth turning off the overlays here, just so that you can see the particle. Without the overlay, it's much easier to see. You can change the strength and you can see how that's affecting the particle, right? So you can set it to something like, I think around 10 would be good. You can see it's got like this glow edge around it. And then you can change the color. So you can pick any color you want now. It can be quite a contrasting color. It can be something similar. A slightly different shade. This is really down to you. So I'm going to pick something around here. I want it to be a slightly different blue shade to the blue color that we're using at present. You can see a slightly different color to this lighting at the top and the bottom here, this one. Okay, so once you set that all up, go to the particle emitter and then go to the particle system here and then click new, and we're going to set this to around 100. We don't want that many particles, we don't want it to be crazy. We'll go to the render settings here and then click object here, then show emitter, we're going to turn that off, and then go to the object here, and then in the object setting here select the particle that we created here. Then we need to go to the field weights and set the gravity to 0. In fact, let's leave it on 1 at the moment. Let's click play. Now we can see some particles, but they're all being emitted and they're going downwards, right? So let's press 0 so we can see the camera view. Let's go back to the first frame, and in the gravity we're going to set that to 0. Then we'll press Shift A, and we're going to insert a force field wind. And let's turn on our overlays so we can see this wind object, and the yellow arrow represents that it's moving in the upwards direction. So the wind is going to push the particles upwards. So let's press Shift A again, and we'll insert a, let's see, we're going to insert a turbulence as well. So we've got two here. We've got this one here is going to be called, let's go to the particle settings. It's called wind. So this one here we call it field wind, and the one below we're going to call it field turbulence. So we've got field wind and field turbulence. The field wind, we'll set the strength to, we'll leave it at 1, and the turbulence will maybe set that to around 2 for now. Then let's go back to the first frame and play. Now we can see they're going upwards, but strangely, I think I've done this wrong, right? Let's see. Okay. So I made a little mistake here. The floor, I've made the particle emitter, whereas I created this plane specifically to emit the particles. So we really have to fix this, right? So sometimes we make mistakes. Let's go to File, Save, and really I need to rename. You might not have made this mistake, so yours might be okay. You might have actually created the particle emitter just to emit particles from this this plane object that we created here, right? So I'm going to fix my one. The particle emitter, I really need to rename this. This should really be called floor. Then this plane here is actually the particle emitter. So with this one, I'm going to click on, actually I'm going to click on the floor first, and I'm going to remove the particle system from here. Get rid of it. Then I'm going to click on the particle emitter, which is actually this element here, and let's see, we'll click, don't think I can get the old one back, so we'll click new, we'll set it to 100, we can set this up quite quickly. So we'll go to the render settings here and we'll click on object. Then in the instance here we need to set it to particle. Then we will go to the field weights and set the gravity to 0. And then let's play this and see what happens. Let's click play. So they start on frame 100. So really we need to set out timings, right? So let's think about this. We need to let's press F12 quickly. Let's just render out one frame. Okay, so looks like these are dying way too quick. So let's set the lifetime to around 150 for now. So these particles will live a lot longer basically. Maybe their size is way too small, so let's go to the let's see, here on the render we've got scale. Let's scale them up to around 0.5. so yeah, we set it to 0.5 here. Then the randomness will turn that all the way up. Now we should be able to see them a bit clearer floating up, right? So let's render out one frame. We'll press F12 to render it. It doesn't seem to render, so I think we need to bake this. So we'll go to the first frame. Let's go to the cache here and click Bake All Dynamics. Then when we click play, we should be able to pause it and render F12. Now we can see the particles floating up. So that's good, that's working. Now what we need to do is work out how long we want to run this at 60 frames a second, right? So we want around, we could run it at 30 frames and just save a lot of frames. But I kind of like running at 60 frames because it's much smoother. So what we'll do, I think we'll set it to, we're going to set it to, let's say, let's do a bit of maths here. So we want around 7 seconds, right? So times 7 takes us to 420. So we want to set the end frame to 420. We need to rotate our mouse wheel on this timeline. Middle mouse click and drag it across. You need to see the whole timeline here. So right now the particles start on the first frame and they're going to go all the way across and they're going to be finished by frame 252, something around here. That's it, no more particles are being emitted. So we don't want that. We want first of all we want to sort out this light. So let's click on this light here. Let's drag it to the side here so it's out of the camera view. Let's zoom out a little bit here. So we'll put the light around here and we just want that light to move across the screen. So we'll press the record button. We'll click on the spotlight back here and go to the object data, and over this setting here we're going to press the letter I. So press I, that will insert a keyframe for the locations, and then we're going to move all the way down to around frame 410. So we're going to leave like 10 frames blank, and then we're going to drag this across to the other side of the screen to around here. So that will simply move our light object across the screen. So as the light gets closer to this text, I want the particles to start emitting when the light is close to the text around here. So that is going to be, actually let me press Ctrl Z. Should undo that. If you want to see where the light is going to be, you need to move it on the timeline. Don't drag it because you're going to end up inserting a keyframe. So around here, which is frame 125. So we go to the particle emitter, click on the particle settings, free the bake here, and set the start frame at 125. Now the particles won't start emitting until frame 125, and they're going to end on frame 200, and they'll be all done by frame 340. So they're going to move up, float away, and they'll be done by the time they get to frame 340. We really want to slow their movement a bit. So what we can do is go to the particle settings here. We can turn off the record option for the minute, and then what we want to do is go to the velocity and set that to something like, in fact let's just set it to 0. Set it to 0. If we click play, the particles start moving a lot slower now, right? Because it's the wind that's affecting the speed of these particles now, not the velocity. So that should be fine. Now what we want to do is make sure on the first frame, frame 125, we're going to hit the record button and go to the particle. So we go to the particle emitter, go to the particle system here, and we want to go to the scale option here, scale, and press the letter I on scale here. Then we'll move to frame like 300 and press the letter I here again. And then we're going to go to the last frame, which is around 351 on my computer, 351. That should be okay. We'll press the letter I here again. And this time we'll double click, delete this and press 0, insert 0. So in effect what will happen is the particles will start to be emitted, and they'll be of normal size all the way up to frame 300. And then when it gets to frame 300, they're going to start to reduce in size. So ones that are still on the screen will actually fade away. That's what will happen. You can, yeah, that should be fine. That should be good. So let's press the record button. We'll click on this light source in the middle and drag that out of the camera view. So the camera can't see that anymore. And we'll go back to the first frame. Here on the first frame, we're going to hit the record button and we're going to click on this light source here. Then we'll go to the light source, where is it? It's called light spotlight top. We're going to go to its object data and we're going to press the letter I on energy. So hit the letter I, make sure the record button is on, move your mouse cursor over energy and then press the letter I. And then we're going to move to, let's see, so it's about frame 125, right? So on about frame 120, we're going to press the letter I here again. And between these two frames, on the first frame, we'll move back. And we'll set the energy to 0. All the way down. So now when we move, if we right click here and drag across, the light is going to illuminate the text. This light is going to flow through. The particles are going to be emitted. And then it's going to get to this side, and then probably at around, let's see, frame 100 and let's see, by frame 340, on frame 340, we're going to go back to this energy here for the top spotlight. Click on the energy, press the letter I, then we're going to go all the way down to frame 420 here. Press the letter I here again and set this one to 0. So the lights will now fade in and fade out on each side. Like that. Now the only thing I would probably do just to improve this slightly is move to the first frame, click on this light source. Can you see there's a bit of light coming out here, showing down here? It's a bit hard to see, but I can see a little bit of blue light. That's coming from this light source. So I'm just going to drag it back a little bit more. So it'll be completely black frame. Then when we drag it in, you won't see that light source, but you'll see it now. And then you'll drag it and then it will fade out at the end. And that should be okay. And maybe on the end frame, where is this one? On this frame here, frame 410. Let's see, I might drag it. Let's see. Let's go to this frame 410, right? It's a little bit hard to move, so let's go to the object data. Then on the, let's see, that will be on the Z location. So let's move it across a bit more, just so that we haven't got any sort of color from that light source in the scene, because we want to fade all the way to pure black. So that should be it. That should be pretty good. The only thing we've got to do now is go to the solid view, so we can see it in solid view. Click File, Save, click on the camera, and then let's hit this record button, right? So then on the location, press the letter I, and then on the rotation, press the letter I. And while this stuff is all happening, we want to move the camera back slightly, only a little bit, just a few frames. Make sure you don't move it too far back, because you want the floor to be inside of the camera view right here. So the text will move. In fact, it won't move yet. This is the first frame, right? So let's move down to frame 410, I would say. 410, let's see. 410. And then on the y-axis, we're going to move it forward a little bit. So between this frame and this frame, the camera is going to move slightly forward. Not a lot, just a little bit. That's all I want. I just want a basic camera movement. I don't want it to be doing anything too crazy. We'll just leave it nice and simple. We'll go back to the render view. Let's click play. Let's file save and click play. It's always worth watching it. It's not going to play it in full frames and high res, and it's going to look a little bit iffy, the light in the background, but we'll get a general understanding of what it's going to look like. I think that's going to be okay. So let's go to File, Save it as version 3. Let's click Save. Then go to the render settings. Now this is kind of optional. If I move to like frame 160, for example, where I can see the light at the top here, if I render it out on 2 pixels here, tile size 2 pixels, if I press F12, it's going to take a lot longer to render that frame. So normally I do this rendering while I'm doing other jobs or work in the background, and I let it render out this frame. So let's just check this one frame. You can see it's taken quite a long time to render one frame. So that's the one frame done. The advantage of setting it to 2 pixel size is you're going to get better edging down the side of your light source, especially around the edging down the sides here. So if I were to close this and then set it to something like 4, and then render it one more time, press F12, it should render it a lot quicker. It's done already, but the lighting will be a little bit more pixelated across the edge down the sides. So I would say 4 is pretty good. It's okay. So we can probably leave it at 4. You can set it at 2 if your computer is quite fast. I think that's going to be fine. Distribution, I'm going to leave this alone. It's set to 0.800, so yeah, this kind of leave it as it is. 0.8, and we're pretty good to go. I don't think we're going to do much else, so let's go to the output settings, press Ctrl S to save. We're going to set it at 60 frames a second. 420 will give us 7 seconds. We'll tick 16-bit color depth. We'll leave it on our, actually we don't need to do that. We'll go to AVI JPEG and we'll just set it to RGB. So select AVI JPEG, RGB, leave it at 90% quality, click on the folder, go to the desktop, go to the folder for the project, click accept, and then just press Ctrl S to save, move to the first frame, and then press Ctrl F12, and Blender now will render out all of those frames and create the video. So we'll wait for it to render out the first frame, the first few frames. That's frame 1 is going to be black anyway. The first few frames, probably the first 5 or 6 frames, are just going to be black frames until the light source starts to show. So let's just see, we'll wait until we see something just to make sure it's working. I can start to see the light source coming through up here at the top. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to let Blender finish rendering out, then we can check the video at the end. Okay, so Blender's finished rendering out all the 420 frames. So we'll close this down, we'll go to File, Save, and then we can see this is the last frame in here. We might just move it to the first frame. Go to File, Save. Let's close this Blender down. Then on my desktop I've got the folder, and inside this folder I've got this new video. If we open it, we can see the new video with the lighting effect. Let's just make that full screen. So you can see it's a black frame at the beginning, which is what we wanted. Then this light above will start to illuminate, and you'll see the lighting hitting this text here, this volumetric lighting. And as we move across, the lighting will get brighter here, and then this light source will flow across. When it gets close to this text, it's going to start to emit these particles, right? So here you can see it flowing through. So that's pretty much everything in this tutorial. I think it came out okay. It's slightly different to the one that I did before. So you need to play around with the settings inside Blender to get that volumetric lighting the way that you like it. So it's down for you to experiment and just play around with the settings and see what works for you. Sometimes it's worth just, before you render out the whole sequence, just move to a frame like this and render it out and see what it looks like. And then you'll know what the final video sequence will look like once you've completed it. So let's just play that out one time. And at the end it's going to fade out and then fade to black. And this is the one that I made before. You can see the lighting is slightly different, but the logic is pretty much the same between these two video clips. They're pretty much identical in terms of workflow. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP web tutorial.